Hey guys, my name is Eric, and today I'm going to be talking about the next chapter for America and what we can do as shooters and a community to prepare for what comes next. Go ahead and roll the intro. Hey guys, thanks for checking out another HatchetCast episode. And today we're talking about what is the next chapter for America and what can we do as a community to prepare for what comes next. Make sure you guys hit the like and the subscribe button. Also hit the notification bell so that way you get updates about any new things that drop on the channel. If you are curious about when we drop episodes, it's every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 19:30 for all you military types out there. And it's a great way to support the channel. If you get something out of our channel, make sure you share this episode or other episodes with a friend or a family member and organically get that content out there so that way everybody else can benefit off of it, and it's a great way to support us for free. Last thing also is make sure you go check out the website. We have classes for the rest of 2024, as well as the Barrel and Hatchet 5.56 Gas Gun Challenge in Holt, Florida. That's going to be in December, and you can actually sign up for that gas gun match. There's going to be a ton of giveaways and raffles just for showing up. The other great thing is, on the website, I now have a Guns and Gears page dedicated to parts builds and lists. So like if you saw a rifle build from another video, I have an entire parts list on the website where you can find that exact part, find the rifle build, it has a picture of it, and you can click and get that part ordered so that way you don't have to search the internet. I just kind of took all that workload off your plate. It's also a great way to support the channel. So with all that being said, I'm going to be doing a lot of ranting, just like I did for that introduction, but this is something that's been really, really heavy on my heart, especially in light of the recent events with the presidential election. So for those who didn't know, and if you live under a rock, we had the American presidential election here in the States, and actually Donald Trump just came out on top as the presidential nominee for the United States of America. So he'll be number 47. This is a successful re-election for him. It was a crazy race, and a lot of weight and circumstances are kind of weighing on this race. And I know a lot of us here in the community were really paying attention to the polls and really paying attention to all the data that was coming across all the different social media platforms, just like I was. And I think that is a reason why things went so well and so smoothly, and why counting and all these different types of things went well, is because a lot more people were informed, a lot more talk was being done, a lot more observation of just different processes and procedures were being done. And that kind of leads me into my first point, which is making sure that we're staying informed. Now, one of the things that can be the bad side of staying informed is you can get overwhelmed with all of the stuff that's going on around the world, and it can make you super stressed out. I was definitely falling into that category for a little while, where I kind of get overwhelmed with all the stuff that's happening all around the world, all the terrible things that's happening in other countries, the threat of nuclear war, the threat of civil war, and knowing that that's even happening, or all the stuff that's happening along the border. And these things can be super, super stressful. When I talk about staying informed, what I mean is a healthy dose of unbiased and good information that's vetted, that you do your research on your own. In the military, we have intel shops, or we have intelligence sections within different units that look at all of the different events around the world, whether that's through secret methods or through open source methods, just searching the web. And what they do is they utilize that intel to provide that intelligence to a commander or team leader, so that way that team leader or that commander can make an informed decision and develop a course of action, or a COA. So when it comes to the intel side, they usually will look at like an enemy and the status of the enemy, the type of equipment that they're using, where they're located, what is their makeup, what's their rank structure like, what is their organization like. And then off of all that intelligence that they gather that's very specific and very directed, they will then develop a most likely course of action that the enemy will take, or a most deadly course of action the enemy will take based off of a commander's plan. And so having an intelligence apparatus that you have set up through your research, through finding good vetted information across different social media sites that's being shared, that's also done by independent journalists that are highly vetted, that are not biased. This allows you to kind of develop your own courses of action and contingencies for planning to make sure that you're ready for anything and not getting caught off guard. The flip side of that is you don't want to be an ostrich with your head stuck in the ground and you're just pretending that nothing's going on and I'm just not affected by any of that. In my opinion, when a lot of people who are, working families, working class fellas that are just focused on providing a meal for their family and getting money coming in to be able to pay the bills and take care of their families and just, get through life and help their kids have a good life, that don't really have the time for political, intelligence or political activity. And so what ends up happening is behind the scenes, opposition is then taking control of those political areas and then making, laws, developing policies that don't go with the morals that you have or with the traditions that you have or your values. So it's super important, in my opinion, to make sure that you're at least having your head in your local politics, whether that's at your school boards, or your district, or your counties, being involved in those elections and having a say, not to a point where you have to be a full-on politician, but enough where you are involved and you can actually have a say in what goes on. And that's a right that we have here in the States that most countries aren't afforded. And so, for me, I'm speaking to myself a lot. I've been really naive about that. And so I'm trying to get better at, paying attention to local news, pay attention to, who's going to be running for what position in a district school board or, for the city or for the town or whatever, and making sure that I have a say in terms of what policies are trying to be pushed through and, seeing if I can be involved in that. So make sure you get into your local election and your local politics as well as, national stuff. But you can't do that unless you are informed, and informed with good information that allows you to form your own opinion about what's important for you and your family. So I kind of ranted on that quite a bit, but what I will say about this last election is that it was, in my opinion, so weighty and so important, specifically because of the effects that it would have globally. And remember, things that happen within national politics can also affect your life directly. So as if you have where a national leader is now inciting having a war with another nation, that can directly impact you and your family, especially if you are of draftable age. And so I think that's one thing that was really worrisome to a lot of people was, one, would these politics divide the nation and cause conflict here at home? Would there be a possibility of world war with the Axis powers, a direct competitor to the West? And so if that did happen, understand that it's one of those things where history happens slowly over time and then all of a sudden. And so making sure that those who are in positions of power have really good foreign policy, I think was super important, especially with negotiating deals or, figuring out ways to come to agreements. Nobody's probably going to be happy about it, but at least there's not going to be any fighting. There's not going to be a huge loss of life. And right now, in the past 4 years, globally, there has been a massive loss of life from conflict. And so understand, as escalation continues and you start going up that escalation ladder, eventually you're going to come to a tipping point where it's going to be a hot war, and a hot war could directly affect you and your family, especially if you're a husband or if you're a wife and you get drafted and now you have to find someone else to raise your kids, and it's just a mess. And so the elections, in my opinion, were such a big deal specifically because of foreign policy, and that could directly impact me, could directly impact people that I care about and that I love, because I don't want to go and see other people go off and get sent to war, nor have to have people that I care about have to go through the atrocities of what warfare is like. And I kind of talk about the horrors of war in another video that I did a while back on the channel, but if you want to, you can go check that one out. But war is not a fun thing. It is not something that is good for society. It is actually something that really just tears down the young people. It eliminates a large demographic of people, especially younger folks. And so the last thing you want is to hurt the nation by going to a war with another country, especially a nuclear war that's on a global scale. So with that being said, there's a possibility with this new administration coming in, if they survive, by the way, if they make it to January, Lord praying that they will, Lord willing that God will protect them, that they'll make it to January to be able to be in office and start making changes to policies. But one of the things that we have been afforded by the grace of God is the time to prepare. And specifically when it comes to preparing is, I want to start off with training. You got to go out and train. Like if you weren't able to get training this year, start looking at next year. I know that for me, I'm going to be developing a 2025 schedule for classes, but if you have another good instructor that's highly vetted, go find out and seek out good training from good instructors, because the time to get that stuff is now. There's a lot that you can get on open source via YouTube and via other resources, but it's super important for guys to go out and physically take a class. And not just shooting classes, but medical classes, stop the bleed classes, maybe even a foraging class or a class on survival. Any type of class that you can take to be able to broaden your skill sets and make you more capable, you now have the possibility of having more time to invest in yourself. Understand, there's an old saying that says, if you have more skills, you need less equipment. So making sure that you're sharpening yourself and then utilizing your training that you have to also train other people. I always tell students a great way to reinforce the knowledge that you have, that you learn in a class with me, is go and teach it to a family member. Go teach it to your spouse or your brother or your friends, or take it back to your community and be like, hey, here's what I learned at a barrel and hatchet class, or I learned at another instructor's class. And so then you kind of run that training event for them, and you can teach them all the things that you were exposed to and help reinforce the skill sets in your mind, and also start training up those who are around you. And I think that's so important to be able to invest in yourself and turn around and invest into your community, because the more capable you are, the more that you can be an asset to the people in your life. And I think that's just so important. The other thing, like I was talking about earlier when it comes to intel, is now you also have the possibility of time to build a good plan or to reinforce a plan that you already have in place. Run your plan through a testing process, whether that's in the field or maybe just talking it over with your friends and your family members, or talking it over with your community, and talk about all of the different problems that could arise with your plan and how you can identify fixes for those problems. Utilizing intel from current events to be able to kind of test that plan out to make sure, hey, is it good? You know, doing a drill with your family and be like, hey, how fast can we get all of our necessary items in our go bags, get them in the car, and get out of the house? You know, is my fuel topped off? Do I have gas cans that have stabilizer in them? How are my food stores? How am I able to get my food stores to a different location if I need to? Do I have a bug out location? Do I have even if I don't own property, do I have a space maybe in a national forest or a park or something of that nature, or at someone else's property that we can kind of gather together as a community? The time to prepare that type of stuff is now, and also we may have the time to be able to iron some of those things out. Understand, this is all speculation. This is just based off of the current events and the intelligence that we have, based off the situation. It could pop off tomorrow. So just looking at it with some optimism and saying, hey, I might have the ability to finally get some of that training. Maybe this is a wake-up call for you to be able to start developing a plan with you and your community. The biggest thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to fall back asleep over the next 4 years and be like, oh, everything's good, and just kick your feet up and become lackadaisical and relaxed. And then all of a sudden you lose out on the opportunity of plenty, where you can use that time to get yourself ready and become more capable. The other thing that you should consider is prepping. When I talk about prepping, I'm talking about supplies. So gear is obviously going to be the last thing. Making sure that you have all the equipment that you need. If you're going to go out and go training, spend more money on ammo. I think there's a possibility. Who knows? Don't quote me on this, but maybe if things start going well, economy starts going good, maybe some of that ammo prices will start to drop. I'm hoping, even though right now it's claimed that they're going to go up starting in January, but hopefully things start to look better where we can start to afford more ammo to be able to go out and continue to get more and more reps. The more reps that you get, the better it's going to be for you. Dry fire is super helpful and really beneficial. However, it can only get you so far. You got to put in those live fire reps, and you can only do that with obviously live ammo. So make sure you're stocking up on ammo, not to just hoard it, but also to have a bunch set aside for your training to make you better over time. The other thing that you can do is also getting things that have higher value. You know, having gear, having you know, parts, you know, buying new rifles and things of that nature, making sure that you have things that can be good for bartering or for trading, maybe having some silver and some gold on hand. This is the time now, as things hopefully, based off the intel we have, hopefully over the next 4 years will be a time where we can kind of use that as an opportunity to increase our preps, to increase our supplies, to increase the amount of resources that we have available, so that way, after whatever comes next, you are ready, a lot more able to help yourself, your family, and others who are going to be in need. So when it comes to buying, you know, different types of equipment, I think it's super important. If you have extra gear and equipment, you can probably think of a family member, or like I can, you know, a friend or a family member who would definitely be someone that doesn't shoot a lot, but may need some equipment. All that extra equipment and stuff that you have can go towards outfitting other people within your community or in your family. So don't feel like you have too much extra gear or that gear is going to go to waste or whatever. Being equipped with good equipment and with good gear. So it's not going to go to waste. So with that being said, guys, I know this was kind of a rant about just preparedness, but the biggest thing if I could stress any point at all, is don't utilize this time to kick your feet up and just be like, oh, we're good for the next 4 years. Use this time as like, thank you, Jesus, for this blessing. Thank you for your grace of giving us more time to be able to get ready and to prepare. Because remember, history happens slowly over time and then all of a sudden. And so that brings me towards a lesson that I had given to me over the past couple weeks while I was at Shepherd School, and I'd love to share that with you. That was super encouraging for myself. So in the book of Genesis, there is a chapter called, in chapter 5, so in the book of Genesis in chapter 5, there is a whole section about Adam and Eve and their descendants all the way to Noah. Now what's crazy about this is Adam and Eve, obviously the first people that walked in the Garden of Eden, they lived to be really, really old. Prior to the flood of Noah and Noah's Ark that you probably heard in Sunday school, the earth was a completely different atmosphere. Everything about the environment was completely different. In fact, in the pre-flood age, it never rained. There was just a dew that would come over the entire earth, and also water that would spring up from the ground that was able to water the plants and all the vegetation. And there's a lot more science that I'm capable of explaining, but it's really fascinating to look at. So what's really interesting is the byproduct of that different type of atmosphere and environment pre-flood allowed for human beings to live a really long time. And so with that kind of information, it's really fascinating. But this story is set right after Cain and Abel, that whole story where Cain and Abel were sons of Adam and Eve, and Cain killed his brother Abel. And it's that old Sunday school story that you heard about. If you haven't heard about it, go check out the story Cain and Abel. It's in Genesis chapter 4. But in the following chapter, Adam had lived 130 years, and he fathered a son in his own likeness after his image and named him Seth. So they had another son, and they named him Seth. The days of Adam after he fathered Seth was 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. Now understand, it wasn't where Adam was born, lived 930 years, then Seth would live. So there was a lot of these characters that are mentioned in the genealogy that had overlapping. So Adam was alive for a long period of time, and you know, he was able to tell the stories to people who were his descendants of like, hey, here's what it was like in the Garden of Eden, and here's what it was like to walk with God in the garden, and what that was like, and how God's character was. And so he was able to tell all of these descendants about God and who he was and his personality and what he was like and what it's like to walk with the Lord. So it wasn't like these descendants had no idea about God. They had Adam, the very first human being, able to tell them directly and tell them about all these experiences. And so people were able to understand who God was, and also they were able to understand what sin was and how the fall of humanity had happened, and you know, get it firsthand account. And so Seth was the third son of Adam, but you also have to remember Cain also existed and was alive after the Cain and Abel story, and Cain fathered a lot of descendants that actually ended up walking away from God and actually committed like some of the first murders, committed some of the first songs and praises about murder and about their exploits and pride and worshiping idols and things of that nature. So it's pretty wild to read about. It says here, when Seth lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. Seth lived after he fathered Enosh 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he fathered Kenan. After he fathered Kenan 850 years, and thus had other sons and daughters, and thus all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. When Kenan had lived, he fathered Mahalalel. Kenan lived after he fathered Mahalalel 840 years, had other sons and daughters, and then he died. Mahalalel, after 65 years, fathered Jared. Mahalalel lived after he fathered Jared 830 years, had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he fathered Enoch. Jared lived after he fathered Enoch 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. Understand, Jared was still alive for a long period of time, while Enoch was obviously alive. So Enoch, really interesting character here, had lived 65 years, and pay attention to this name, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So Enoch, walking with God, understanding the relationship that Adam, his great-great-great-great-grandfather, had with the Lord, and Eve, his great-great-grandmother, and he heard all these stories growing up, and he worshiped the Lord and worshiped God, and he walked with God so closely that Enoch is actually one of the two characters in the Bible that never died. In fact, it says that God took him off the earth. Now understand, his dad Jared is still alive even after Enoch is taken away. So his son got taken away and he's still stuck on earth. But what's great is that Jared must have taught Enoch about who God was and fathered him correctly and raised him up well, where Enoch had a loving relationship with the Lord, where he just walked so closely with him like a father and son that God took him away. And what's crazy is, Methuselah was Enoch's son, and I told you to pay attention to the name Methuselah. Methuselah actually means, when he is dead, judgment shall be sent. So I want you to understand that. So that means that the Lord had discussed with Enoch, probably most likely, how to name his son, because Enoch could see something that was coming that the Lord was telling him about. And so he named his son Methuselah. Most likely, we can speculate, off the command of the Lord, saying, hey, you're going to name your son Methuselah, and this is what it means. When Methuselah dies, judgment comes. And so Methuselah lived 187 years. He fathered Lamech. Methuselah lived after he fathered Lamech 782 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Methuselah were 969 years. Now I'm going to pause right there. What's really fascinating about Methuselah is he is the oldest living human being in the Bible. And what's crazy, as you continue to go down the genealogy of Methuselah and Enoch, Noah becomes the final descendant. And Noah, as we all know from the children's story, was someone who walked with God, found favor with him, had his sons and their wives and his wife, and they were able to get on the ark and escape the flood. And what's fascinating is Methuselah died the year of the flood, the global flood event, and he lived to be the longest person in the Bible. And what's fascinating about that is that Adam and Eve and Enoch and Lamech and Seth and all these people were most likely telling people about who God was and sharing these stories about the Garden of Eden and what it's like to come back to the Lord. And God, in his grace and in his love, says, I will not judge the earth with the great flood until Methuselah dies. And God allowed Methuselah to live so long to give people more time to come back to him, because he wants that relationship with them. He wants them to come back to him. And it says during the time of the flood, it was evil, so evil that the only people that were not thinking about evil all the time continuously and doing evil things was Noah and his family. And so when we look at this type of story, one of the great lessons that we can take out of it is during these times where God is giving us this grace to prepare and to be able to talk to other people or to get ready for things, this is by the grace of God. It is a miracle, and I think it's one of those things where we need to utilize wisdom to be able to prepare our families, prepare our loved ones. But out of all of the preparations that we need to have, the biggest thing is telling people about Jesus and who he is. It wasn't, Methuselah was not alive for such a long period of time so people could prepare and, build a raft or whatever. People thought that Noah was crazy for building this giant ark because it took him a long time to build the ark, hundreds of years to build this ark. And so people were not seeking the one thing that was the most important, and that was a relationship with God. And, we have the outcome of things and certain events that are really, encouraging and very positive to a lot of people. But understand, tomorrow is never promised, and we need to make sure that we have that relationship with the Lord specifically because he wants to have that relationship with you. And there's been a lot of times, especially in my life, where I look at myself and I'm like, man, maybe I don't deserve God. I've been so, so bad, or I've screwed up so many times, or he doesn't understand what I'm going through, or maybe he doesn't understand my past and he knows. Dude, one of the best things that someone ever told me is that you will never surprise God. Whenever you mess up, it's not a surprise to him. He already knew about it. He knew that you were going to mess up, and that's okay. He loves you still. He cares about you still. In fact, the things that you mess up today or in the past or what you're going to mess up in the future, he's already paid for that on the cross when he came and died for all of our sins. And what's great about that and what's so encouraging is you are worth everything to him. And if you feel like you're not worth anything, or you feel like, you're just a burden to people, dude, I'm telling you, the creator of the universe, Jesus, Yahweh, God, thought of you specifically when he was on the cross, and he knew that it was all worth it specifically for you because he loved you that much that he wants to establish a relationship with you and have you come home to him like a father and son, or a daughter and son, or a daughter and father. And so I want you guys to know that here at Barrel and Hatchet, we care about you. I care about you. I understand if you're going through a hard time, I've been there, and I want you to know that Jesus cares so much about who you are. He made you perfectly the way that you are, and he loves everything about you, and he believes in you, and so do I. And so, guys, I hope you got something out of this rant. It's just something I've been thinking about a lot, but I want to make sure that we are all prepared and we're all ready. And also, if you are a Christian and you are maybe like, I haven't been doing a lot of Bible reading and stuff like that, I get it, because I literally came back from this, shepherd school Bible course, and I've been kind of lazy with my Bible reading, and so it happens. But I got to make sure I take the discipline and be like, Eric, go back into the Bible and get refreshed and get some of that nourishing word, man. And it's a struggle, but I pray and I ask the Lord for help every day to continue to digest in his word, and also get to understand and know who he is better, because he wants us to know him, and reading the Bible is our way of doing that. So, guys, if you're going through a hard time, make sure you email team@barrelhandhatchet.com. For all my Christian brothers and sisters out there, make sure you're not being a closet Christian like I used to be. Go out and be bold with love. Talk to people about the Lord and how much hope he can bring into their lives, because there's a lot of hope that needs to be found out there. So, guys, I hope you guys have a good one. Train to be the eternal asset, and I will see you on the next one.